The Man in the Suit, written by Hunter Cairn, based off the analog horror by Unknowingly. Prologue. For 30 years, my identity was never questioned. For 30 years, I kept it a secret. For 30 years, I put on a smile every time I entered the studio, so no one would get suspicious, even though they knew that I also knew. For 30 years, the incidents were completely isolated. My name is Alex Egisu, and for 24 years I have worked as a cameraman for Toho Productions in Japan. Or, at least for some time, I was a cameraman. I still live in Japan, but I never started from here. I was born across the Pacific in Salem, Oregon, the United States. My parents moved there in 1928 when my dad got a job in Portland. I was born in 1932. I enjoyed life by the sea. Everything there was calm. Everyone knew each other. And no one judged our family for being Japanese. That was until December 7th of 1941, when the Imperial Japanese Army launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. I was 9 at the time, and did not understand why my family's roots were attacking the Americans. It just seemed so wrong to me as a kid. The next day, we were at war. Men were being drafted, the women were at work, and suddenly everyone in our town refused to even talk to us. It was like we were traitors. Being Japanese in America in the 40s was not a friendly time. People rushed past us when we made eye contact. I had to sit in the back of the class at school, and everyone glared at us when we went shopping. For 4 years, our lives were ignored by any American that walked near us. It wasn't all so bad, as our neighbors felt sorry for us. Even my best friend's family still talked with us. But after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, my family decided to move back to Japan. My father feared that now that Japan lost the war, the US government would be cracking down on anyone of the Japanese race who might have been spies for the Imperial Army. I was so upset to leave, but now that I was 13, I completely understood why. We, of course, moved back to Japan. We had relatives living in Tokyo, and they agreed to let us stay. Their house was big enough to hold an extended family, and there were only 3 of us after all. I quickly adjusted to my new life. My older cousin Ikoda helped introduce me to my new school, but since it was post-war Japan, education was much slower than back in Oregon, so I ended up skipping a grade to get caught up with what I already knew. After I graduated, I moved out of my relative's home and found someplace in downtown Tokyo. It was first a ratty old apartment, and then I bunked in a college friend's seaside house for a while. Then, after pulling some strings, I bought a house just outside of Tokyo near Yokohama. It was a quaint, tiny house that was just a place for a lonely guy like me. Unfortunately, I was out of a job and had to find a good workplace. It was then I found Toho Studios, a large company that was starting to make a name for itself. I always enjoyed using a camera as a child to record some warm memories back in Oregon. So, as you'd expect, I got used to handling a large 35mm movie camera. My first film was the legendary Seven Samurai, which was directed by Akira Kurosawa. It was a lot of work considering the runtime, but it was a job that I enjoyed doing. They paid me pretty well, and the box office made sure of that. It was during production of Seven Samurai that another Toho director named Ishiro Honda was working on his own film. I was immediately intrigued because it was a monster movie. Back in Oregon, my family took me to see King Kong when I was 7, and I remember being so fascinated by how they made a 50-foot gorilla come to life. So, as you can imagine, I did not once question the idea when I was told that the monster for Honda's film would be brought to life by a man in a suit. Chapter 1. It was mid-August of 1954. I was 22 years old, and Japan was strolling through a hot summer. I remember walking into the studio wearing a tank top and rolled up khaki shorts. June had started with the mid-80s and low 90s along the coast. By July it had soared to 100. August was slightly cooler, but we were all tired of the 90-degree heat. Living in Japan, I was still getting used to everyone saying it was the upper 30s outside when it was clearly more than that. My family grew up with Fahrenheit, not Celsius. Inside, the writer's department was much cooler. Ceiling fans were working overtime, and the quiet sound of typewriters filled the breezy silence of the hallways. I walked down to Ishiro Honda's office. He was the co-writer of the movie I was going to film, but more importantly, he was its director. I stepped inside and found several men sitting by his desk. There was Takeo Murata, the film's writer, Tomoyuki Tanaka, the film's producer, and Eihi Tsuburaya, who was going to work on special effects. There were 4 other men inside, whom I assumed were also working cameras for the movie, just like me. I took a seat at the only available chair left in the room. Tanaka started handing out cups of water for everyone in the room. We were all tired of the heat. Honda took a drink from his cup and then stood up. "Thank you all for coming today. We have a busy production ahead of us, so let's be ready for it. To start off, here's the script." He then started handing out booklets containing the movie's plot to everyone in the room except for Murata and Tanaka. It seemed that all 3 of them worked together to write the script. When he passed a copy to me, I looked closely at the front cover. Gojira was the name of the film. A smirk twitched across my face. Clever name, I thought to myself. We then spent the next 30 minutes silently reading the script, and I absolutely loved the idea. A giant monster, born from the fallout of the hydrogen bomb, wreaking havoc across Japan. I thought to myself how they were going to make such a creature appear to be destroying Tokyo. But my mind told me that it was up to Tsuburaya to help bring that to life. After we were all done reading the script, all of the camera guys and I were chatting up what we thought of the idea, and it seemed everyone was a fan of it. Then Honda broke the silence. "All right. It sounds like you are all interested in this idea. Hell, you should have seen our faces when Murata Tanaka and I were writing this. So now that you have all read this, let's get down to basics." He started walking over to a chalkboard. It was a map of southern Japan, with the studio labeled in Tokyo, the Shima Peninsula in Mai Prefecture, and a small village called Toba. "We are going to film scenes of Odo Island here." He pointed to the peninsula. "Other shots of the island's village here." He pointed to Toba. "And city shots here in the city." His hand returned to the point of Tokyo. "You all get the opportunity to film in these locations. We will film in the studio after all of our scenes are shot outside of the city. Just keep in mind that it will be hotter than the furnace out there. But I'm confident that we can all get through it. So, let's get to it." A few days later, we met up in Mai Prefecture, and we quickly got to work. We filmed scenes of scientists and Odo Island residents running up a hill, acting like something rose from behind it, then ran away. Next, we traveled to Toba to film a ritual by the island's residents to ward off the beast that terrorized them. Then some set designers constructed a wrecked section of the village and dug a large pit to show that it was the footprint of the monster. Filming outside of Toho Studios was a nice change, but the heat was unbearable. So much so that Ishiro Honda had to direct the scene shirtless. And after about a week of filming, he took some time off to recover from the blistering sunburns he got. Still, we were making progress on the film. When we came back to Toho Studios, we were greeted by Eihi Tsuburaya, who decided to show the cameramen what the set looked like for the scenes Gojira would be on screen for. We were escorted to a massive soundstage at the back of the studio. It was around half the size of a soccer field with a large silver dome overhead. It looked like a warehouse, but instead of things being stored in it, there was work going on inside. We entered the building to the sounds of many crew members at work and the sight of a miniature city filling up most of the space. The buildings were up to 4 feet high, houses you could trip over, and railways that looked like they came from a model train set. And all of this was going to be destroyed by the end of production. The crew members were buzzing with work. Some were crouched down in the city doing finishing touches, others were standing around taking notes on the design, and some were at the back of the soundstage unloading crates of miniature explosives to give the illusion of mass destruction. Subarai showed us around the tiny city, handing out small car props and handheld tanks that were remote controlled. Subarai set one of them down and with a large remote controller started to drive the tank through the streets of the city. He flipped a red switch, and suddenly small pops of fire were shooting out of the turret. We started to laugh, not because of how funny the tiny tank was, but we were all very excited to start filming the destruction of Tokyo. Counterintuitive, because the building currently residing in the middle of said city was our base of operations for filming, so the thought of filming our own city burn was pretty ironic, considering that less than 10 years before, 2 of Japan's cities were leveled by the bomb. On the other hand, Honda reminded us that Gojira was a metaphor for the destruction and power of the atomic bomb, because that is what created him. The day before Honda returned to the studio, Subaraya had a surprise for all of the crew members. For weeks, we were working on this movie, but we had never seen what the monster in the film would look like. But today, that was going to change. Subaraya led us into a smaller soundstage not too far from where the Model City soundstage was. This building was almost half the size of the other, containing a large pool which we all assumed were shots of the bay, and in the corner of the warehouse was something about 6 to 7 feet tall, covered by a tarp. 3 men were standing next to it, who we didn't recognize. 2 of them introduced themselves. One of them was Taizo Toshimitsu, and the other Akira Watanabe. They were both the designers of whatever was hidden underneath the white tarp. The third man was quiet. He only greeted us with a friendly, "Hello." He was around 5'10" and looked at us with sad but friendly eyes. Watanabe spoke. "So, I assume you are all ready to see what is going to be the end of Tokyo." Everyone laughed and smiled. Toshimitsu cut in. "We have been designing this for the last 4 weeks, so we hope you all like it." Watanabe grabbed a tarp. "I present to you all, Gojira!" The tarp fell, revealing a fantastic-looking suit. It had a charcoal appearance with a rubber-like texture to it. It was covered in hand-carved scales, its back was lined with dull-tipped white dorsal fins, and a long tail that also had a dull tip. Its feet only had 4 toes on each foot, with sharp claws on the ends of each toe. The legs had more build than its tiny arms, but they still looked strong and menacing, especially with those sharp claws. The head of the suit was rounded, with 2 rows of sharp teeth and fangs, a cat-like nose, and pointy ears like a bat. The eyes looked big and were focused straight ahead like a 1,000-yard stare at something on the ground, unmoving, intimidating, large white eyes. The room filled with gasps, then a brief second of silence. Then it was a chorus of excitement. We all couldn't wait to watch this magnificent beast destroy a miniature version of Tokyo. As we all cheered for the designers in their amazing creation, I noticed a quiet man standing by the suit. He wasn't cheering. He just stood there and stared at the suit. A look on his face reminded me of a shy kid, like he was either approaching a bully or Santa Claus. I couldn't tell what he thought of the suit, but I didn't think of it too much. What mattered to me now was the fact that I was soon going to be on set, watching Gojira get to work. Chapter 2. The suit wasn't all that we had to make Gojira come to life. Toshimitsu had made a small puppet that would be used for close-up shots of the monster's face. And the first scenes we had to film were Gojira's first appearance on a hill on Odo Island. We first filmed him eating a cow. Honda was iffy on that and later cut it from the movie. Then we moved our cameras to a model of a hill with a painted background of the sky. Toshimitsu crouched behind the hill, with the menacing puppet in hand. He lifted his hand up, and the puppet slowly peeked over the hill. The camera was fixed on it as the puppet opened its mouth to act as if it were roaring. It all looked like a silly puppet show without the sound. Even Toshimitsu growled behind the hill to mimic the puppet. We all laughed. We shot a second take of the sequence just in case and presented the film to the editor, Taichi Taira. At this point, the Odo Island scenes were officially done, and all that was left was Tokyo's destruction. Honda decided that all of the shots in the water should be done first, so they could get the hard part out of the way. The suit had been tried on by its performer apparently, when we were out filming other scenes, but we never saw who was going to play the role. But it turns out, we actually did. The suit was dragged on set carefully by some crew members. It looked uncanny as it settled to the floor, like the Wicked Witch melting in The Wizard of Oz. Some of it stayed pretty firm up, like its head, that still had that stare painted in its eyes. Suddenly, a man walked out on set. It was the quiet man we saw the day the suit was revealed. This time he had a look of confidence on his face. The crew members lifted up the suit and slowly the man started climbing in. Of course, I thought to myself. He must have been so eager to play the role, he didn't know what to think of it. We watched as the suit started taking the form of the man. The arms flailed as he slid them into position, and the suit stumbled as the actor inside tried to gain his balance. The suit was now hunched over, but slowly started cranking back up into an intimidating stance. The suit's torso started shifting left to right as the actor inside was warming up. He began to take a step towards the pool. The crew members that assisted him into the suit were now helping him into the pool, and keeping his head upright so he wouldn't fall into the water. One of the men started talking to the suit. "You okay in there?" A faint, "Yes," came out of the suit. "Do you think you can submerge yourself and rise back up?" the crew member asked. "Yes, I think I can do that," the actor said once again. Then he slowly dunked his head in the water, then quickly shot back up. The crew members kept a tight grip on the suit. "Just testing the water," he said nervously. "I'll try again." He slowly dipped his head back in the pool. Then the entire suit submerged with him. The crew members crouched with him as now the suit disappeared into the dark, murky waters of the pool. After about 5 seconds, the suit slowly rose back out of the water. "Let me try on my own," he said. The crew members slowly let go of the arms and backed away. When they knew the actor could support himself, they jumped back out of the pool. I set up my camera awaiting the cue from Honda to start rolling. When he yelled, "Action!" the suit started descending back into the water. Then I started recording. After another 5 seconds, the monster slowly rose back out of the water. He turned facing away from the camera ever so slowly, then went back under again. I cut the camera. This was the part of the film where the passengers on the luxury boat saw him emerge from the bay, then go right back down. We checked the film again as the suit rose back up. The crew members jumped back into the pool to check on the actor. "I've got it, guys," he said, this time more muffled because of how wet the suit now was. The crew gave him space as the actor started wading himself back to the steps of the pool. When he was halfway there, Honda yelled, "Hey, don't go too far. We have to do a second take. You know, just in case." "Just give me a minute," the actor said, as he started to get out of the pool. After about 10 minutes, the crew members assisted him back into the pool, and the second take went by much more smoothly than the first. As the actor started to get out of the suit, we began to notice just how hot it was in there. I walked over to it and looked inside. A blast of sweaty hot air came out of it. And it was here that I took note of how the actor was supported inside. 2 ropes that looked like suspenders were attached to the legs of the suit to keep the actor upright, and some metal wires formed like a cage in the neck. It was fitted for the actor's head to keep him supported, and tiny holes were poked in the mesh of the neck so the actor could see outside of the suit. I then thought to myself of just how miserable it must have been for the man who would have to wear this for the hundreds of takes we still had left. But to our surprise, that was never the case. The next day, we had to do a couple more shots in the pool. The actor came onto the soundstage with an excited look in his face. He walked in and started doing jumping jacks to psych himself up for the take. We were surprised to suddenly see this much energy in him. He hopped right in the suit as the crew members helped him fasten in again. And then he spoke to them. "Guys, I appreciate your help, but I think I can get myself in the water today." As he said that, he began to stomp right into the pool, creating dramatic splashes as he sank in. The crew members looked worried for a minute, but as soon as he was fully in the water, they figured they should just leave him to it. We filmed any remaining shot of him in the fake bay as he did his dramatic rise out of the water and his stride towards the shore, which wasn't there. We did our second take of those shots, and then moved on to his return in the sea after destroying Tokyo, which we would film later on. Miniature jets on wires were flown past Gojira and shot sparklers, as if they were attacking him with missiles. The whole process took about 2 hours to film, but apparently, the actor in the suit wasn't ready to stop just yet. "How about I let this dry for 30 minutes, and then we can head on over to the city set to film?" Hondo was surprised by this enthusiasm, then said, "We can, if the camera crew are okay with it." "I can go for a couple more hours, sir," I said eagerly. "Alrighty then, let's get to the soundstage," Hondo said. We entered the warehouse with the model of the city in it. The set was finished. As soon as we walked in, all of the miniature lights in the city turned on. It looked beautiful. Too bad it was all about to come down. Luckily, there were extra building props on standby just in case we had to shoot some of the destruction again. The actor, who was still in the suit, stood in awe as we watched the body turn left and right, as if Gojira was even amazed by the sight of the city as well. He couldn't wait to start filming. We first went on over to the railway section where Gojira's first on-land attack was to be filmed. This is where the excitement really started. The man in the suit started to stomp towards the stations and the miniature trains driving by. His arms hung over his chest with open claws, and occasionally one arm would rise up for a menacing roll of the claws from every other step that was taken. My camera was hung low on the set, creating the illusion of just how big Gojira was. It was the most spectacular sight from the camera's point of view. Dust and rubble erupted from the ground after each and every stomp, even though there were small holes in the floor shooting up the dust like an air pump. He stepped on an incoming subway train and reached down to pick it up. He held it in his grasp for a moment, and then threw it back onto the set. After we were done shooting, everyone looked excited. The man in the suit seemed even more so afterwards, because he could hardly contain himself. He wanted to shoot again, but we needed a break. Everyone on set started talking about how audiences might react to the footage we just recorded, of this building-sized beast stomping across the station. But that's when it hit me, and I suddenly became overwhelmed with worry. We had already been shooting the movie for 6 hours, and the actor never once took off the suit. I immediately became concerned and asked the crew members if they should go check on him. They rushed over and told the actor to get out of the suit. He complied and started scrambling out, but he didn't understand what was wrong, because there wasn't anything wrong at all. I was just wondering why he was in a hot suit for that long. But once he was fully out of it, we noticed blisters on his face and arms. Hot air blasted out of the suit, and Honda was quick to point out, "Are you okay?" The actor looked confused. "I'm fine. Is everything alright?" One of the cameramen blurted out, "Your face! It looks burnt! That suit is burning you alive!" This time, the actor looked scared, then demanded to see a mirror. A crew member brought him one, and he looked shocked. "Oh my god. Is the suit really that bad?" Akira Watanabe was brought in to inspect the suit. He studied the state of the actor, and then the deflated suit on the ground. "I should have elaborated on this. We had to make the suit look as realistic as possible. So we had a concrete mix put in to add some of the scaly texture to the suit. Unfortunately, this caused the suit to become extremely heavy and thick. And you have been walking around in a 100-kilogram furnace for 6 hours straight. You need to take a break from the suit, my friend, or you might be out cold one day on set. The actor looked back in the mirror, then his arms, then the suit. That's when he agreed to take a break from filming, and production was officially cancelled for that day. The suit was put up for the night and everyone headed home. I had a hard time falling asleep that night. My head swam with confusion. How could he be in that thing so long and not even notice how hot it was? None of it made sense to me at all. But eventually, the heavy weight of exhaustion knocked me out. Chapter 3. The next few days of shooting were dedicated to shots in the city of civilians running from Gojira. We had to film at night, so certain neighborhoods were blocked off for filming, including the one my family still lived in. I often went to visit them, and they agreed for Toho to shoot the movie there. They didn't mind at all of the drama, for they knew I was used to this much work. After about 3 nights of shooting, we went back into the soundstage for more shots of Gojira destroying the city. I started to notice just how accurate the models were. One of the sections was an exact replica of my neighborhood that we recently filmed in. I was impressed, and a bit suspicious at the same time, but that didn't matter. It would only be noticeable for 5 seconds anyway before the silhouette of a giant behemoth took over the frame. We spent a few more days recording shots that only needed Gojira's bottom half. A second suit was constructed to separate at the legs, and the camera was planted low enough so no one would see the human actor controlling them. We then got some very exciting shots of large fuel tanks exploding and buildings burning. We even went outside and blew up a fake police car when Gojira used his fire breath. Finally, we thought it was time to go back to filming with a full suit on set. The actor had mostly recovered from his blisters, but they were still kind of noticeable. On the phone with Honda, he still agreed to put on the suit and keep filming. When he walked into the soundstage that morning, he looked different. He was covered in sweat, and his eyes looked red and watery, as if he had smoke in his eyes. He said his allergies were acting up, and we thought so because it was now late September, and the trees were now dropping leaves and pollen. He took a seat at one of our break tables in the back of the soundstage when something dropped out of his small leather pack. It landed softly on the ground with a hollow clank, and what sounded like pebbles rolling around inside. It was a tiny capsule, a drug capsule, with the label torn right off. I saw the ripped paper still attached to the side of the bottle. As soon as we noticed, the actor swooped down and snatched the bottle. "Just some allergy medication," he said, and he sniffed out loud, but it didn't sound very nasally. We shrugged off any suspicious thoughts and got to work. As usual, the crew members helped him into the suit, and he politely refused any help from them onto the set of the city. At this point, the crew was used to this and just let him go. He stomped gracefully on the tiny roads of the town, and we started rolling. He walked slowly into the city, looked around for a bit, and then Gojira opened his mouth, and then fire erupted out of one of the buildings nearby. We knew he was pantomiming his atomic breath, and special effects would add it in later. He looked at the destruction and continued on. My camera was fixed on the beast as the actor continued his playful rampage across the set. I looked over at Honda, who had a big grin on his face. This was going to be the biggest success that Toho had ever seen, and I could see the dollars rolling in. But I only cared that we were having fun. And we were! After those shots were complete, the crew moved on to another section of the city, and Tsuburai got to work with the remote-controlled tanks. He carefully drove them into an open area that Gojira was standing in. They fired upon him, shooting out those little pops of fire. They looked puny against the massive build of the monster. The actor once again opened its mouth, and the floor of the set caught ablaze, and the tiny tank slowly backed away from him. After we cut the cameras, 2 crew members rushed in with fire extinguishers to put the fire out. We spent a few more hours walking around the set filming any shot that we could get of Gojira leveling the city. After we got through the last available section of that soundstage, we decided to call it a day. "Great work today, everybody," Honda began. "I am very confident that this movie is going to be a smashing hit." He looked at the man in the suit. Literally, a smashing hit. We all laughed. "Okay, you're all free to go home." As we packed up our cameras, Honda approached the man in the suit. "Alright, let's get this heavy thing off you." The actor started backing away from him. "What? You're not burning up in there?" he continued. That's when the actor spoke. "With all due respect, Honda," he began in a low voice, "I think I'll keep this on a bit longer." He began to walk towards the exit of the soundstage. Honda started to lose patience. "Hey, you can't take that home. That's Toho property." The man in the suit turned his back and kept walking. "Well, I'm the one wearing it, right? So it actually belongs to me for now." Honda was silent for a minute, but before he could say another word, the actor slammed the soundstage door shut, still wearing the suit. We all stood for an awkward minute in utter confusion and shock. We all exchanged glances with our eyes. Even Honda stood in a daze. Finally, he spoke. "Well, I guess he's not worried about burning. He'll come in tomorrow without the suit on and be fine. For now, I want all of you out of here. There's nothing wrong with an actor loving his role, even if he takes his work home. You all got that?" We all nodded in agreement and continued to pack our gear. The next day we returned to the soundstage with a surprise. Not only was part of the city reconstructed, but the man was still in the suit. He must have taken it off at home, and they just slipped him back in it this morning. I thought to myself. I tried to wipe away any suspicion that I was thinking this guy was now obsessed with his suit. The day went by normally. We refilmed some shots that looked tacky the day before and finished up different ones. Gojira stomped over to a clock tower and clawed at it. It toppled down with a spectacular crash as the clock slammed into the street. The monster stepped on it for good measure and continued his path of destruction. We filmed some more shots, and that's when Honda decided to call it a day. "Tomorrow we will go over to the other soundstage with the pool. We recently constructed a bridge that Gojira will flip over. But for today I want everybody to go home and rest. Tomorrow we will hopefully finish filming the entire destruction of Tokyo before we process the movie for final edits. And then we will hopefully premiere our movie by November." Some crew members cheered, and others clapped. I was happy, but a bit upset that we were going to stop with this project soon. I still looked forward to the premiere though. Honda turned to the man in the suit. "Are you going to take that thing home again?" he asked. "Yeah, I think I will," the actor spoke. "Okay then, you do you, Gojira." They both laughed, and the actor left the soundstage, and this time didn't slam the door. We entered a smaller soundstage the next morning feeling more confident than ever. We were so obstinately determined to get these shots right, even though we never had too many problems with filming. And once again, the man was in his suit, but this morning, he never said a word. My mind started to tell me that this guy had been wearing that suit for 2 days straight without taking it off, but I quickly threw that thought away. This guy can't be that crazy, I thought to myself. We set up the cameras and began filming. Gojira, now underwater, slowly started wading over to the bridge. With a mighty grip, he lifted it from its support beams and tossed it into the water. With a massive splash, the water hit the nearby shore like a flood, capsizing model ships docked in the ports nearby. He continued walking through the water, and that's when he stopped. It wasn't too abrupt, but he just suddenly stopped in place. He stood there, motionless. We waited a few seconds, then a minute, then 2 minutes. Finally, he moved again. But after just a couple of steps, he stopped once again. This time he stood still for 4 minutes without moving a wince. Honda then jumped into the water and approached the frozen beast. Hey, if you ever need a break, just tell me, okay? Nothing happened. You okay in there? Honda asked nervously. Silence. He began to poke at the suit, then gave him a nudge. Then he tried to shove him, but the man in the suit stood still. He didn't lose balance. He didn't flinch. An unsettling wrath of tension flooded the soundstage. I need help over here, Honda called out. And with that, 3 crew members jumped into the water without hesitation. They helped the director drag the actor out of the water out into the open room. They set him down on the floor and began to tug on the zipper for the suit. Even one of the strongest crew members was struggling to get the zipper to move, so he asked for the designers to come in. Moments later, Toshimitsu and Watanabe barged in and examined the suit. We need to cut him out, Toshimitsu explained. Go grab some shears in my office. As soon as he said that, Watanabe was already storming out of the building. Through all of the commotion, I walked up close to the suit. I immediately noticed that the actor inside wasn't breathing right. It sounded like every breath he tried to take in hurt his chest. Other times it sounded like he was trying to take in quick sucks of air. But they all sounded painful. We were all thinking that he was beginning to suffocate inside, but he continued to stand still. He would have been struggling to stand if he was suffocating, but he just stood there. Now with several people surrounding him trying to pull on the zipper. Just as Watanabe came back with the shears, the zipper came loose. Hold on a bit longer, we'll soon get you out, one guy exclaimed. He began to slowly unzip the suit, but when he was halfway, blood started oozing out of the zip. They immediately zipped the suit closed. What the hell? Tanaka, the producer, said. His back must have gotten caught in the zipper, Toshimitsu proposed. Watanabe came over and encouraged everyone to stand back as he worked to get the man out. He began the incision on the upper back just above the zipper, but when he was through the skin of the suit, more blood started gushing out. He stopped cutting and quickly tied it off with a bandage close by. Everyone started backing up. The man in the suit just sat there, as if he didn't even notice that he was hurt, as if nobody touched him at all. There was yet another minute of unnerving silence, and then Watanabe said something that made me shudder. Is it just me, or does the suit seem more stiff than usual? There was a pause in his tone. What do you mean, more stiff? Honda cut in. I mean, I was trying to cut into the suit, but it seemed more like I was cutting into the skin of an animal. Another pause, this one more uncanny than the first. Make some room, men, Toshimitsu said, as he and Watanabe approached the actor. They spent the next couple minutes prodding at the suit, feeling which part felt more flimsy than the other. Then Watanabe put his hand on the neck of the suit. Can you hear me all right? He said, and we all expected that familiar voice to come out of the suit. But no. The head of it nodded. So impressively, it looked like the monster was answering the question. It had never moved that way before. Okay, can you say something for me? Watanabe continued. This time, a scratchy noise came out of the suit, and Watanabe jumped back. It sounded like the low growl of a dog. No, I thought to myself. It sounded more like the growl of a lion. My blood ran cold. Watanabe slowly approached the suit again. This time his hands ran up from the neck to the head of the suit. His hands grazed the nose, then felt the ears, then the mouth. What happened next was frightening. The jaws of the mouth quickly snapped shut, nearly biting off Watanabe's arm. I'm so sorry, he cried. We all stood in shock. The mouth never moved like that either. Suddenly, the eyes of the suit started shifting down to meet Watanabe's. Then the head slowly lowered down, and now the suit and Watanabe were met face to face. He had no words, just a look of horror upon his face as he began to piece together what was happening. The man was no longer in the suit. He was the suit. Chapter 4. Honda immediately shut down the production. We had all the footage we needed, so cameramen were no longer needed. He and the producers started ordering all of us to leave the set and go home, and not to tell anyone what had just happened. Some were confused, but some of us knew. I knew. I spent that night trying to process what had happened that day. They were cutting into his skin, I thought. They were cutting into his skin! It repeated in my head like a broken record all night. None of it made sense. How did he become the suit? How was he still alive? Was that even possible? It drove me mad. I wanted to go back to the studio and check on him, but the idea of that made me sick. But not finding out what they were doing to him made me even worse. The next morning I skipped breakfast and went straight to the studio. I barged into the writer's department and went straight to Honda's office. I went inside and expected Honda to kick me out, but he didn't. He just sat at his desk with his head in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. "Rough night, I assume?" he asked, trying to lighten the mood. But I didn't laugh. "Yeah, me neither. Sit down, let me fix you a cup." He got up and walked over to a kettle of hot tea. As he was pouring some, he spoke again. "You're the only one who came back. Everyone else called last night and told me that they would never set foot here again." My eyes went wide. Then I said, "Even the producer?" "No, only the cameraman. I'm still waiting on the rest of the crew." He turned around and handed me my cup of tea. I took a long look at the lemon that swirled in a drink. "How is he?" I asked, and as if he knew the question was coming, Honda spoke. "He's doing fine. We brought him some doctors to examine him, and it turns out he's taken on a new form." At that comment, I put my drink aside and felt I was going to throw up. "I should have just said he was fine," Honda began under his breath. "Look, I don't know what to say. We may never get him out. If we try, we might kill him. So for now, we're just keeping him as our studio pet." I glared at him. Then I stood up. "What do you mean your studio pet? What are you going to do with him? He's a bag of bones that has taken on the form of a fictional character, and you're just going to let that be the case? How do we know he's not suffering inside of that thing? Have you asked him?" "He can't say a word," Honda cut in. "The doctors have examined that his vocal cords are torn. He can only make the sound of an animal." I sat back down, and this time took a sip from the tea, then threw out the lemon inside of the cup. I began to grow impatient. "What about his family? What will they think when they find out that someone very close to them has become a reptilian monster?" Honda went quiet. He lowered his head and then said, "He doesn't have a family. He lost his wife and daughter in Hiroshima, and he has no relatives we can contact." I sat in silence for a second, then slumped deeper in my chair. This poor guy is hopeless, I thought. And as if he read my mind, Honda spoke again. "He may be hopeless, but we'll be there for him. You just have to trust me. You can go see him if you want to express your sympathy to him." I don't want to be the one to patronize, but I'm afraid that's just who I sound like right now. He bit his lip, and I stared sadly down at my cup of tea, contemplated for a minute, and then stood up. "I would like to go see him," I said in a shaky breath. "All right. Follow me," Honda said, and then he got up from his chair and we left the room. We walked silently down the corridors of the building. Then he led me to a door at the back of the studio labeled "Private" on it, that looked like it was recently painted on. He slipped his key in the lock, and with some struggling, he hastily opened it up. We stepped inside. This was originally built for a fake prison set in one of our older films. Now it's the only place we can hold him in. We walked down a winding staircase to a row of iron doors down a short, narrow hallway. The walls were lined with light gray bricks, and low-hanging lights lit up the corridor with a warm glow. I thought to myself how they managed to drag such a tall creature, in this tiny space. Honda then pointed to one door in the center of the hall. It had a sliding window on it. I nervously walked over and pinched the sliding door lever. I took in a deep breath and with a strong jerk forced the window open. I wish I hadn't. I was met with the horrific sight of those eyes staring into my soul. I jumped back and yelped out loud. Honda jumped too. "Hey, stand back! We're letting in a visitor," he said to the beast inside. Slowly, I watched the man in the suit step back in his cell. Honda unlocked the door, and I took a step in. My heart was pounding, cursing me for every step I took inside the cell. The man in the suit sat down on a large bed. His tail hung from it as it started moving like an impatient dog's would. His eyes still stared at me. I came to realize that the suit never had eyelids, and this poor man could never close his eyes. It hit me once more. The eyes looked bloodshot, as if the man in the suit could now see me through those eyes. I swallowed hard. Then I spoke to him. "You probably remember me. I'm your cameraman who watched you act on set." The suit's eyes began to widen. Then the mouth of the suit began to curl up into a wide grin. His small arm reached up and patted me on the shoulder. I wanted to run out of the cell as fast as I could, but my conscience started telling me that there was nothing threatening about the situation at all. It was almost comforting. And I knew it was the one thing that I needed right now to get me through this phase of fear. My muscles relaxed. Then I spoke to him again. "You can control your head. That's good." The eyebrows of the suit raised up, like he was agreeing with that answer. I let out a nervous chuckle, then turned my head to Honda, who had been looking inside the whole time. He too had a small grin on his face. I turned back to the man in the suit. "Well, I'll talk to you again later if you want me to." The suit nodded, and I walked out of the cell. As soon as I was out, Honda closed the door to lock it. "Why do you need to keep him in there? He's not doing anything wrong," I asked. Honda's smile faded. "We can't let the public see him." "Could you imagine what they might do to him?" Honda explained. "They could kill him out of fear, or know it is a suit and try and get him out, and that would still kill him. I know he's not dangerous. It's the public that is. So this is his new home for now until we move him someplace more relaxed." I looked at him, and then it hit me. "What about the movie? If everyone sees the film, they'll fear him even more, won't they?" "Exactly. But we can't cancel production because I already signed a contract with the company. Alex, we can't stop the premiere now. We'll just have to see what the world thinks of the movie." I wanted to urge Honda to stop the film from releasing, but I knew it wouldn't change the world's view on Gojira, no matter how they saw him, whether it be on the silver screen or right on their front doorstep. So we left the cell block and headed back upstairs to the writer's department where the atmosphere felt more calm. Honda began to escort me out of the studio when a thought slipped into my mind. "Honda," I began, "I know I'm just a cameraman and my job is basically finished, but by chance, could I still help out with any finishing additions to the film?" Honda looked at me and raised an eyebrow. He caught on to what I was really asking from him. "Of course you can, Alex. In fact, we need to record the soundtrack of the film. You can help set up the microphones in the recording department." And with that, he started walking me to the department he was talking about. My plan was to stay with production as long as possible, to monitor how the man in the suit was doing in captivity. And I had a feeling Honda knew that as well. For the next few weeks, I kept regularly visiting Toho Studios to help with anything to get the movie finished. I sat in a recording booth as Akira Ifukube composed and conducted the thrilling soundtrack of the film. I assisted Hisashi Shimonaga as he recorded the sound effects, and listened to the epic roar that was created for the monster. The sound was spine-chilling, and was created by a leather glove that was dragged over loosened strings of a contrabass. The audio was then slowed down and echoed to create the sound of the roar, and the rest was history. Finally, the movie was finished, and on October 27th, we were invited to the film's premiere in Nagoya, Japan. When we got there, hundreds of people were already waiting in line to get tickets. It was an overwhelming sight, to say the least. While everyone sat facing the screen, Honda and I sat in chairs facing the audiences to see their reactions to the film. The screen lit up to show the logo, and that's when the stomping of footsteps filled the room. Some people jumped in their seats. The stomping continued, and as the screen faded, a loud roar filled the room, revealing the title of the movie, Gojira. Some people cheered and applauded, even before the movie started. A smile formed across my face. For the next 90 minutes, we sat still facing the audiences, watching their reactions from the first sighting of Gojira to the spectacular destruction of the city. The ending came along, and the creature was vaporized by a superweapon, as one of the main characters was sacrificed for the greater good. The characters mourned for his loss, but were glad that the monster was gone. That's when the movie ended. Everyone cheered and clapped. Honda and I left the theater in amusement. "Did you see the looks on their faces when he showed up on that hill?" I shrieked. "What about when he was in those power lines and breathed fire?" We talked and laughed the whole way back to the studio. The film later became a major hit, and everyone currently still working on the film were amazed. We were all glad that audiences loved the movie. They loved Gojira. Even the man in the suit was happy about the results. But there was still one thing. Despite the success, despite the money, despite all of the glory, the Toho Corporation wasn't ready to stop there.